Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another special edition of Litter Media Live. I'm your host, Mike Smith, along with Chillicothe Mayor Luke Feeney. He'll be a regular fixture this week. We'll have him back to talk about fireworks tomorrow, but talking about some other city business today. Our special edition brought to you by Classic Brands. Back with Mayor Luke Feeney right after this.
Are you looking for a beer that satisfies your thirst and love of country? Armed Forces Brewing Company brews beer for patriots. Celebrate freedom with every sip. Armed Forces Brewing Company. Freedom never tasted so good.
Back with Chillicothe Mayor Luke Feeney. It's been a month since we've gathered with you to talk about city business, and one of the things we wanted to make our viewers, our listeners aware of, a new transit director for the city of Chillicothe.
New transit director, but a familiar name and face for the city and the county. Pretty honored to be able to appoint Doug Corcoran, former county commissioner, to that transit director spot. And I'm just real proud of how he's hit the ground running over there. The transit situation, the system is pretty complicated because it is a mix of local tax dollars and federal dollars that flow through the state. And so one of the big tricks over there is figuring out how those dollars match up and what the budget looks like. And then figuring out all of our routes. You know, we have the new on-demand, we've got the trolley. But one of my favorite things just from the early days since he's been here is he made a comment to me about the grounds at the transit facility and just some areas where he thought we could present a better sort of front door. It's a nice facility, but he was talking about how we can improve the ground some. And so I think that's just a vision thing and something that I appreciate in my directors is kind of thinking beyond just the small parameters of the job and how we can always present the city in a better light. So excited to have him on board and happy that he's hit the ground running.
And a new operations
manager, yes. So a few years ago, we sort of restructured management at the transit department. There's three management positions there. There's director and there's a fleet manager. Those are the two that have been there for a while. But then we also recognize the need for an operations manager because there is so much to do with the different staffing, the hours, making sure that the right people are in place for the right types of driving that we have. And so that position is a civil service position, and we had somebody who applied and got the job a couple years ago. And the way city civil service jobs work is when there's an opening, there's a test. Mm-hmm. And so let's say 30 people take the test. We can choose from oftentimes the top 20% of those people if they score high enough, but the list stays active. And so if you ever are interested in a job with the city, just keep in mind that if you don't get it at the first go, you remain on an active list. Mm-hmm. And if that position then becomes vacant again within a year or two before the list expires, then we might call you back because as it turned out, we had an operations manager leave. We had an existing list, and we were able to hire the person who was our parking enforcer, mm-hmm. And internally, and put him in the position of operations manager. And that's Verinda Souza, who's done a great job over there as well. And I think that that's something that we've really tried to do in the city over the last 8.5 years is make sure that people are aware that there's opportunity within the city. Mm-hmm. So you might start in the back of a trash truck, or you might start in recycling, or you might start as the parking enforcer. But, we had a position, Officer Boltonhouse started at transit, then he went to be the parking enforcer, then he went to the police department. So there's a lot of opportunity at the city, and we want to make sure that is well known, opportunity for growth, training, that sort of thing.
There's a couple of things about routes we wanted to mention before we get into a graphic on our screen that producer Aaron Glenn will put up in a minute. But first of all, this is something that's been around for a while. This is a map, of course, of Ross County, and a number of years ago, Chillicothe City Transit became more rural as well. And when you think about, well, why would the city do that? But a lot of these people are wanting to come into Chillicothe, and maybe they just didn't have the wherewithal, the ability to get it done.
That's absolutely right. And I think the state recognizes that clustering service providers makes a lot of sense. And so it wouldn't necessarily make sense for Bainbridge and Kingston and Frankfurt to have their own transit systems. So we do get a little bit of funding from the state and use our city tax dollars to help provide those services. And some people are coming to work from the, out in the county villages and townships. Some of them are coming in to shop. And so it's a system where we've tried to maximize efficiency with getting folks to where they need to be. And I think it's worked out pretty well. We did a reconfiguration a couple years ago, really looked into the data about who is coming from where, what is their purpose. Because believe it or not, there is a portion of people who riding transit is almost like part of their social life. And while we're happy to provide a social outlet, we don't think that it's necessarily the best use of tax dollars. And so balancing that out has worked out pretty well.
And the Ross County Health District has mobility management, which also incorporates transit, a lot of doctor's visits and things of that nature that maybe were hard for people to get to.
Absolutely. And so we also have funding for folks that need paratransit or the ability to get to doctor's appointments. And that mobility management is a system to help connect people to the resources available to where they're trying to go. We've really just taken an approach as a county over the last 10 years or so about thinking about mobility and movement and getting people where they need to go in all modes of transportation. So we're thinking about walking, bicycling, public transportation, and just making sure that people are able to get to where they need to be safely as well.
One last thing, and Aaron Glandon will put this graphic up. Starting July the 1st, there's a little bit of a change that will involve the on-demand. And if you can explain that, we were talking a little bit about it on the news yesterday, and it was kind of a head scratcher for us.
Sure. So we have been doing on-demand for a couple years now. Basically, on-demand is something similar to Uber or a taxi service, but the concept is that we know that our fixed routes don't get everybody exactly where they need to be. Going back to that mobility situation, if you're not particularly mobile or if you need to get to an employer that's not on a route, we wanted to be able to provide both services simultaneously. We have been doing almost constant tweaking to that service, and this recent tweak, essentially what it does is says the on-demand service should be used for those purposes, getting to where the fixed routes don't go. Mm-hmm. So if you're going between 2 points on fixed routes, take the fixed route.
Right.
If you're going from, let's just say you're going from a downtown stop to Kroger on Western Avenue, and that is point A and point B on the fixed route. Take the fixed route to do that. Don't call on demand to get from point A to point B. Because what ends up happening is we need the fixed routes to be maximized and efficient in addition to make the on-demand efficient. And if too many people are relying on demand for a service that the fixed route provides, then it makes the efficiency of on-demand decrease. And on-demand, we really are, if you schedule 24 hours in advance, that's sort of where we're at right now. But we'd like to be able to schedule it closer to when you need to be, but it's a balancing act. And so the new policy will essentially say, if you call in and say, I need to get from point A to point B, and it's on the fixed route, we're going to recommend to you that you take the fixed route.
Moving on to other topics, the last time you were visiting with us back in May, early May, there was at that time a hope that you could get the council to go along with actually reestablishing something that was done years ago, and that is a chief of staff in your office. That apparently did not come about.
Yeah, like you said, it's something that's been there for years and years, and they opted not to fund the position. The reality is the work remains. This year alone, I think we've brought in $40 million in grants. Wow. And there's going to need to be more people to manage that money, manage those projects. And so, council objected to the funding. Some people on council, it wasn't, I think there were five votes against and maybe 3 votes for. So it wasn't even a full council that voted on it. But the point being, there needs to be a recognition that there's a lot of money coming through the city and a lot of work to be done. And the money that comes in has administrative grants, administrating funding that comes with it. So if we opt to not do that work, we're turning money down. And so I look forward to council working with me to figure out how we can administer these grants and maximize our local grant dollars, put people to work, and get these projects going.
Actually, we did see you about a week ago at the Kenworth Truck Parade as they celebrated their 50th anniversary in Chillicothe, and that parade just keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Bigger and bigger. I mean, it is one of my favorite nights of the year. You know, the first year I was so surprised by how fun it was. I didn't know what to picture. Now, you know, celebrating 50 years in Chillicothe, and the year before that, 100 years for the corporation, and I think it's really become a signature event for Chillicothe, and it kind of marks what's been happening downtown across the city for several years now, growth and fun and family experiences. And I think what we're doing now is drawing people from out of town to see the parade too. So every year it grows and grows, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Of course, when you think of the Halloween parade, which has been big for many years, it's a little cool in late October as opposed to doing this in June.
Yeah, and I don't know what Kenworth is doing, but the last 3 years they have dialed up perfect weather.
Must be living right out
That's
there.
right.
Talking, of course, that parade went through the downtown, and more continues to be done in the downtown. And for people that are coming into our community, maybe for the first time, they've moved here, but they don't know the evolution of what took place when the Carlisle building was fixed up after years of just sitting there in almost a pathetic state. And that obviously was the catalyst that got everything else going. And it still continues. It
still continues, yeah. And I think that, you know, you had the commitment by Adina and so many community partners, the Ross County Community Foundation, and then just so many small business owners, either the ones that were already there, or the ones that have sort of taken the risk. And I give a lot of them the credit too, because you know, there's a lot of uncertainty when you do that, and they make those strides. And I think we're at an interesting point now because you know, we hear sometimes people downtown get frustrated with the amount of downtown events. Mm-hmm. And then I visit with other mayors from other communities, and they say, they do what? They complain about what? we couldn't pay to have that many people come to our doorstep. And so there's a balance of making sure that these events are beneficial, and then a balance, you know, parking and trying to you know, the tide raising all ships. And so I think that anytime there's any frustration with those downtown events, I think it's a good problem to have, because we are drawing people to our community who are obviously enjoying their visit. So I hope we keep it up.
Of course, it's not a census year, as in U.S. Census, but are there ways or markers that we can learn if we're growing in between those census years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, you know, there are indicators like new registered businesses, new registered taxpayers. You know, it's hard with water turn on and turn offs because usually that's existing housing. You can watch housing grow. I will note that for the city itself, you know, the county in the last census lost something like 2,000 people. The city itself, though, gained something like 20. So if you look at the state and you look at rural areas, the city, the fact that it didn't lose any might not seem like that big of a deal, but as compared to the rest of the county, pretty significant that it actually had a small gain. And so I think the city continues to thrive, and it continues to be the case that something that is limiting our growth is the availability of housing. And that's why it's such a big focus for us, because more people would live and work here if we had the housing for them. So it's a big focus for us right now.
If there were, of course, this has been debated long before you became mayor, where would residential growth go in our city? West, north, south, what?
Yeah, well, I think we have, you know, one of the things this big zoning code rewrite will do is help with reusing land that we already have. Our zoning code right now makes it a higher barrier for some of these small lots where there's no longer homes to rebuild there. So if we can be a little bit more practical with what we have, and then the city owns the lot where Tiffin School used to be. And so if you can drop in little developments here and there, I think that is one opportunity. And then you're right, looking, you know, north, I think that there's the opportunity for different types of housing north. And then west has always been talked about. And I think that we are, you know, it has been happening to the west, several housing developments, some of them tax credit, that sort of thing, just on the outskirts, one inside the city. And so some of it, especially in this market with interest rates, developers have to be very cautious about what they're doing, and also look to the state for the different types of incentives that are available to be able to make these types of projects in this interest rate environment cash flow and do okay. And that's where those tax credit projects really work out well. I think workforce housing is the name of the game right now, where people have income, but they need perhaps a small subsidy to be able to work, have kids, have childcare, and be able to afford housing. And so workforce housing is something the city is really focused on right now.
One last question. We won't ask you this every month that you come in, but we did have a little bit of an update. The old Tiffin site that you referred to, I think they were just starting to turn some dirt in there for something when you came the last time. What's the update on that?
Sure. So we used grant funds to essentially get that site closer to being ready for some future development. The grant funds allowed us to essentially re-excavate the stuff that wasn't compacted and do it right. We did some grading that would actually sort of lend itself to what future stormwater drainage might look like. And then that money also allowed us to build a sidewalk. That area, a lot of people don't know this, is a restricted access area as designated by the state. And that's why there's a fence in front of Tiffin School. That's why there's a fence that blocks off 4th Street from crossing there. And so that's a designation put on by the state. So we worked with ODOT and put in a sidewalk. Again, this circles back to earlier in the conversation, thinking about mobility, thinking about when there's housing there, how people might be able to walk or bicycle to groceries or to downtown or to the library. And so we're trying to get ahead of the game and use as much grant money to sort of incentivize somebody to come and build there. And I think we're headed in that right direction.
All right. Well, pause the button. The mayor will be back with us tomorrow, but he'll be talking fireworks tomorrow. More good stuff that's happening for Chillicothe. So until then, I think Dan will probably handle that interview tomorrow. That way you won't get tired of one or the other.
Sounds good. Don't want to get tired.
Dan's his baseball coach, too, and they were just commiserating over all their injuries from the last time they played.
Sad but true.
Yeah, we're all getting older. Thanks to Chillicothe Mayor Luke Feeney for updating us on city business here this morning. Our interview brought to you by Classic Brands. I'm Mike Smith.